Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars. SoundCartel. Right now, Australia's digital health market is worth around $2 billion. That's just 1% of the $200 billion global digital healthcare market. And with further spikes predicted this year and beyond, thanks in large part to COVID-19, it's a market set to explode. From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. As attractive as the business opportunities might be in the digital health space, the key is offering tangible solutions to real-world problems. And that's just what Nic Blair has done. He's the founder and managing director of Midnight Health, a business that delivers hassle-free, innovative, online healthcare solutions through niche digital platforms. And their first platform, Yulee, is shaking up the women's healthcare industry, partnering with pharmacies across the country to offer, amongst other select products, Australia's first ever delivery service for emergency contraception, or the morning after pill. They've also just launched a men's health equivalent called Stagger, providing Aussie males discreet access to treatments and prescriptions for erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, HSV, and hair loss via text-based GP and pharmacist consultations. Nic is no stranger to startup success, having launched several businesses and been recognised extensively as Australian Young Entrepreneur by Business News Australia and one of Smart Company's 30 Under 30, just to name a couple. Nic tells me later about the problems that both Yulee and Stagger are solving. But first, having started the company in March 2021, I asked him about launching mid-pandemic.
From our perspective, obviously there's a lot of groundwork that goes into building a business like this prior to launch. So as you can imagine, spent a lot of 2020 as the pandemic was taking its full wrath on the world, researching this space and beginning to build a digital healthcare company. And I think, the only thing that became prevalent throughout that period was the notion that this is here to stay and that digital healthcare and telehealth-led businesses are certainly the way that us as consumers are going to interact with and get our healthcare moving forward. So I think that the pandemic has put a rocket up this space, but it has also just amplified a trend that we were already shifting towards as consumers anyway.
Well, tell us what Yulee is and what made you venture into the world of women's health.
So I was looking in digital healthcare space in general as a whole, and the women's space for sure was definitely the most underserviced. So there's a lot of gaps in women's healthcare from an online perspective. One thing, for example, is emergency contraception. We launched Australia's first emergency contraception delivery, and it was an ongoing problem that kept popping up in my research and discussions with women around how we could help them through healthcare. The old process of going to the pharmacy and being grilled by a pharmacist in front of a line of people about your sexual habits, I think, was clearly a problem that needed to be solved and didn't have to exist in the way that it did in its current form. So we set out to solve that as one of our key goals. And I guess further to that, looking at how people obtain their contraceptive pill on an ongoing basis, looking at online access to thrush treatments and menopause treatments and other areas of women's health, there really was no leader in the market for women in terms of telehealth that was actually trying to solve these problems. So for us, that was a big area where we could make a difference and then also obviously build a great business.
Well, you've hit on a problem that needed a solution, and you've recently launched the men's equivalent called Stagger. What unique problems were you addressing for this market, and what products can now be delivered discreetly for men?
So men's health is a little bit different to women's health. So as you can imagine, with Yulee, we have a very powerful voice and our audience likes to engage and speak about contraception and their reproductive health. And there's definitely a trend to openly talk about that. The men's space is different in terms of, men don't necessarily like to openly talk about their kind of problems, with erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, hair loss, these types of things. They're sort of less likely to have that conversation than women are. So the purpose for the men's brand is to be able to provide access to these things in a discreet online platform that makes it much easier to obtain these treatments. And, since launching Stagger, we're already growing at a rate much faster than Yulee was when that first launched. So I think it's definitely filling a need in the market in terms of that as well.
That's amazing. So then how have pharmacists responded to Yulee and Stagger? And can you just explain the business model for both services?
Yeah, so the response from pharmacies has been great. Obviously, that, as you can imagine, that was a large part of research and discussions before launching the business and realizing that we had no support from them. Through the whole process, we're speaking to a lot of pharmacists who certainly agree with being able to provide easier access to these types of treatments for people. Ultimately, most of the pharmacy community, as well as the GPs that we work with, are focused on trying to enable their patients and people to get the healthcare that they need. So us providing a solution that can get this to our customers in a discreet way or a faster way, or people who live in regional areas can get access to things that might have been more difficult for them previously. We're getting a lot of support from pharmacists, and that flows into the business model in that we essentially provided a referral fee from the pharmacies for the products that they're shipping out for us. And so what that means is that we're all, not only are we helping them to provide potentially better care for some patients, it also means that we're essentially investing in driving business through each of those pharmacists that we're working with as well. So from a business perspective, it means that they're also making more revenue as part of this activity too.
Mazars is an international audit, tax and advisory firm committed to helping clients confidently build and grow their businesses. To find out how Mazars can support your business, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au. We know that healthcare is such a highly regulated industry. How have you successfully navigated any of these barriers?
Well, it started with spending a lot of money on legals, so maybe more than we initially anticipated. But ultimately, as you said, healthcare is an area where we have to make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's and making sure that we're following the legislation. And the majority of responsibility still sits with the pharmacists who are dispensing people's medication and the GPs that we're working with. So in terms of people's healthcare, it's very much reliant on ensuring that we partner with great GPs and pharmacists and their responsibility for patient care. But from our end, it's also making sure that we have airtight agreements with those guys, making sure that we are following the right processes so that we're only issuing prescriptions for drugs that are not of dependency or anything like that as well, where there may also be issues in terms of providing telehealth services.
Yeah, so the product range is limited at the moment to just certain products.
Yeah, that's right. There's a limitation on what we, high strength painkillers, for example, are something that we can't, just issue you an e-prescription and have someone send it out to you in 3 days, because obviously that comes with a risk. So there's certainly limitations in what can be provided online. Yeah,
absolutely. So tactically, how do people access the products through the platforms?
Yeah, so it just comes down to someone visiting one of our websites. So we've built a platform for Midnight Health which powers each of the brands that we're launching to market. So yulee.com.au is the first one, focused on women's health. Then we have stagger.com.au for men's, and we'll be rolling out a number of other brands in different niche areas over the year. So essentially, a patient just has to come to one of our platforms, select the treatment that they're looking for, complete an online questionnaire. That then goes off to one of our Australian GPs who reviews the answers, has a text-based consult if needed, and then issues the e-prescription. Once the e-prescription's issued, that flies off to our pharmacy partners who then dispatch and send it via express post. Or in the case of something like emergency contraception, that will essentially come from one of our closest pharmacy partners to you. So that will be delivered on the same day.
And from a security perspective, how is people's information protected?
So we have a multi-layer encryption through our servers that we use to secure patient data and ensure that it can't be accessed outside of the approved staff, on our team or with our GPs or pharmacists. So ultimately, it just comes down to having tight cybersecurity and making sure that we've got multiple layers of encryption on our data, and that's something that we've had to obviously invest in and make sure that we have the right security in place to secure people's data, particularly when it comes to healthcare.
Now, you hinted at it before, but what's the response been like from patients and customers to both platforms?
It's been fantastic. We have we've had over 50 reviews, I think an average of 4.8 or 4.9 stars on product review for Yulee, and we're already receiving great feedback for Stagger. And one of the best things about it is that other than getting the 5 stars, a lot of the reviews are essentially speaking to the problems that we were trying to solve. You know, that's a life-changing service. People who've obtained emergency contraception, for example, while they've had to stay at work the next day. You know, ordered thrush medication at 10 p.m. at night to be delivered because, you know, they couldn't get it from anywhere else. So there's the best thing about the feedback that we're getting is that it's validating that we've solved these problems that we wanted to and that we thought we could. So yeah, I think that and, you know, the number of repeat customers and this sort of thing are definitely lending itself to a really positive feedback and a great response that we've been getting.
Well, it is a great service, both of them. So what are your plans for Yulee and Stagger? Will you expand the product lines, for example?
Yeah, so that's essentially the first thing in one of our major priorities right now. So after Yulee, Stagger and getting Stagger live was the next goal. And right now we're about to go into a pretty big process of expanding our treatment range across both of them. So we launched sleep treatments on Yulee just 2 days ago and already getting customers through for that, for personalized compounded sleep treatments. And we have a number of treatments, about 17 or 18, that we're essentially now about to start rolling out, a couple per week. And so our goal longer term for those brands and other brands that we launch is to become, you know, I guess as complete a healthcare solution as we can bring to market. And so that's, you know, the first step to that is obviously providing a more consolidated approach to what we can offer outside of just the 4 or 5 that we have on each brand now.
And finally, Nic, what do you think that the future is for digital health moving forward?
Telehealth is expected to double by 2025 in terms of Australian usage, and I think that the pandemic has probably pushed people to it faster than maybe they would have originally. But ultimately, I think that this is a better way for us to access healthcare for many reasons. I mean, it's obviously more convenient, it's more discreet. It means that doctors have more time to work with patients who actually need it, as opposed to go in and write you a new script for a contraceptive pill. People are more reluctant to have to spend time in a doctor's pharmacy now as well, if they can avoid getting COVID when they go there. So, you know, I think that this enables us to start to take control of our healthcare more easily. And ultimately, longer term, you know, our vision as a business is that over the next 5 to 10 years, healthcare will become patient-led as opposed to practitioner-led, which is the current environment that we are in. And the market is not quite there yet, but I think over time and as we start to access and use services like Yulee and Stagger, we'll realize that we can actually have more control over our healthcare and manage that ourselves. And for us as a brand, that's going to be an ongoing focus for Midnight Health over the next 5 years, to merge the online and offline healthcare worlds and reach a point where we have a very consolidated patient-led platform so that you can have more control over your own health.
That was Midnight Health founder and managing director, Nic Blair. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.